welcome. Today I'm making a set of 4 art coins or just circles. I'm not sure exactly the real size of art coins, but mine are 2.5-inch circles. And I'm using, in this case, Bristol Smooth because I am putting Distress ink right on top of them. And I start with some old paper and have a nice fresh new pad of ink, and it's going on so smooth. And I'm using that orange paper just to kind of stop me from getting fingerprints onto the circles. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning here. I was going to do 2 one way and 2 the other, and I start the first 2, and then I'm like, well, this does not look like a family of 4, and so I redo the first 2. But I'm going to show you what I did on the first 2, because I probably will include them into something I'm making in the future, or I may make art card or more circles out of them. But anyways, I'm starting with a Tim Holtz stencil, and I'm adding ink to it. Now, this is a number stencil, and I should have been inking the back. That was another thing I learned from this. First time I've used this stencil, I wasn't really thinking about it when I used it. But I'm going to be flipping that over and putting it onto those circles, and my number's going to be backwards. So just reference if you do this. And it's something that needs to be a certain orientation. Remember, you need to do the reverse. So in the future, I would ink, if I'm using a reverse stencil scenario like this, I would ink the back and then flip it so that it is correct side. So I make 2, and they're totally different from each other as far as the content of the ink, but I'm okay with that. But I end up later setting those two aside because I plan to make 4 that look like they're of the same family. So I'm changing stencils to this one here, and I'm using shabby shutters, although that does not look like shabby shutters, or maybe I did use, okay, shabby shutters and salvage patina. And I'm doing them one at a time here because I want to kind of set the ink or set the stencil down in a certain spot. I don't want them to be exactly the same. And this one had more green than blue, so I'm going to try to do that reverse. On the next one, I want more blue than green, but I'm using the same 2 colors. I'm going to add a little bit of green, and then my last color, I'll add the blue. Just to get more blue in the picture. Give it a spritz, and I'm going to lay it down in a different spot. And I'm just kind of wanting this to be a very subtle background. And I dumped that stencil in a bath of water, although you can just wipe them off because it's just, you know, with a damp cloth or something. As long as there's no texture paste or anything on it. So here I haven't made the decision that those two are not going to be part of my family, but I will momentarily. So I'm adding some distress vintage photo around the edges. And then I was thinking about the art card I made a while back, not too long ago, and I think this is where I'm realizing, okay, this is not gonna go over good, these four together. And so I'm kind of wanting to use the same process that I used on this art card, where I put down, I'm doing it maybe in a different order, but I put down the distress ink and then I'm just stamping ever so lightly a color of a stamp that's, I kind of want just to be kind of floating in the background. I don't really want to compete with the color of the distress ink. I just kind of want to add to it. So I think the two are kind of subtle enough that they'll go fine together. Okay, so here's where, okay, yeah, those two aren't going together. I'm going to make two more to go into this family. And these circles, if you have a Cricut, which I feel fortunate to have one, I just cut out a bunch of these circles and have them at the ready so that I didn't have to stop what I was doing, get my, paper in my Cricut and cut it out. I just pulled a couple more out and added the old paper to the background. And on these two, I decided to use red or pink picked raspberry. And then the orange, I think, is wild honey. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's wild honey. And so the first one has a little more orange in it, I think. So I try to get a little more pink in this one, or vice versa. Can't really tell. So I'm just getting any excess ink off them. And then I'm going to do the stamping. Again, I choose a different portion of the stamp. That's one thing that's really nice about the stamp, is that you can select a whole different angle and just use portions of it to stamp. I have never used the entire stamp on one project. I mean, it's pretty big. I made some what I want to be collage paper on some rice paper, and I used like half of it on one side and half of it on the other side, which I'll probably do something where I can show that to you. But It's a large stamp. And so on these two, I'm picking a different portion. And, just depending on where you line it up, they're going to be different. Now these two, the Distress ink was a lot more vivid, so you don't see as much of the stamp, or it doesn't set out as much as it did on the first two. But I'm okay with that. It gives like a morning daylight, a morning one, and then the other one looks more like it's evening. So I'm gonna do a little bit of stamping, and here I got I got focused on the stamp image, and so like on this very first one, I don't straighten up the circle for how the stencil went on. That really should be how I'm orientating this circle, is by the stencil, how it went down, but I don't for some reason. And so I stamp it, and it's kind of like not center. So I actually, in the final pictures, I do notice it way before that. Like probably as soon as I did it, it's like, oh man, it didn't get straight. But in the final pictures, I redo that one. So that first one will probably go into my scrap bin for something or other. Maybe I can take a punch out of it that won't get those stamps, but I didn't toss it. I'll use it for something. And then I might have actually even just turned it over and did the other side. Now I can't remember. So I'm just taking a couple stamps on each one, and I think they are from the Field Notes stamp collection, Stampers Anonymous. And so I just put one that's up a little ways and the one that's right at the bottom. I think there's one that I do just repeat the whole thing on, from the orange color to the green and blue. I'm planning to do a whole bunch of these circles so that I eventually have enough to maybe mount them in a frame, to have all these circles in a frame. I think that would be cool. So they're all stamped. I think right here, that's when I realized, oh gosh, that thing isn't orientated right. So now I'm looking through all my butterflies, and so you can see what I mean is I have a bunch of stuff ready to pull from. Now some of these came in packets like from Tim Holtz or other die cut packets. Some of them are from things that I have purchased over the years, and once I had a calendar that had a bunch of butterflies. Once the calendar was done, I saved it and cut out all the butterflies. And then also I have a lot of digital downloads, and some are just strictly butterflies. And so I'll print them out and cut them, and I can adjust the size of them if I want. And so I have a bunch to choose from. And in this case, I'm looking for rather small ones. And when I was going through, I'm like, boy, I've gone through a lot of my small butterflies. So I have a mental note to print some of them in a smaller size. So then I got to think, it's like, well, there's a couple here I can maybe make a little larger. Like that one, I think I do make larger. I loved the dragonfly. I thought that was really cute. And that came out of a sticker book somewhere. So I'm just going to make sure that all their edges are have some distress ink on them, just so it's not white. And just being really careful not to bend anything when I do it. And then I start gluing them down. So I only glue the body, the main body of the butterfly, and that way I can kind of pull the wings away from the paper so they kind of stick out a little bit. Oh, that one I did do the wings. I think I let it dry before I let the wings dry before they actually were glued down. And that's it. I got some final pictures coming up. You'll see that I redid the one that's slanted, so that's straight now. But if you haven't subscribed, please do. If you like what you saw, give me a thumbs up. But either way, I hope you guys have an awesome day.